Hello, everyone. This story was found on Reddit, and our team adapted it into a full story for you all today. If you'd like to submit your own story, the link is in the description below. We'll read every single one. Before we get started, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps us out. Now, let's get into it. The drive home from Pittsburgh should have taken 5 hours. I made it in 4.5, fueled by gas station coffee and the kind of restless energy you get when you've been sleeping in a hotel bed that smells like industrial bleach. 2 days, that's all it had been. A sales conference, 3 client dinners, one PowerPoint presentation I'd rehearsed in mirror until I could recite it backwards. Now, I was 20 minutes from my own driveway, and the only thing in my mind was a hot shower and a chance to sleep next to my wife again. 11 years of marriage will do that to you. The road trips stop feeling like adventures and start feeling like delays. I turned onto our street a little after 6 in the evening. The sun was still hanging high over the maples that lined our cul-de-sac, throwing that golden light across the lawn that makes every house in suburban Ohio look like a postcard. Our house sat at the end of the street, a 2-story colonial my wife and I had stretched our budget to buy 5 years ago. It had a wraparound porch she'd fallen in love with the moment we walked to that front door. Sarah had cried when we got the keys. I remembered that. Our daughter Emma was at a sleepaway camp until Sunday, 8 years old and already braver than I'd been at twice that age. The house would be quiet without her, but Sarah and I had talked about ordering Thai food and watching a movie tonight. A 2-night break from being parents. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. I almost missed the bags at first. I was reaching for the garage door opener, clipped to my visor, when something snagged at the corner of my eye. Black plastic. A lot of it. Heaped along the edge of our front lawn, near the rose bushes Sarah had planted last spring. My foot lifted off the gas without me thinking about it, and the car coasted to a slow stop at the curb. There may have been a dozen garbage bags out there. Some of them were tied off, some were splitting at the seams, and parked in our driveway behind Sarah's silver Toyota was a white Buick sedan I didn't recognize. Older model, out-of-state plates, Pennsylvania, which made no sense because I'd just driven home from Pennsylvania, and no one had told me to expect a guest. I sat there for a second with the engine idling, trying to come up with a normal explanation. Maybe she was donating clothes. Maybe a friend was visiting. Maybe the bags were yard waste, branches, something simple. Then I saw the toe of her brown leather shoe poking out of the nearest bag, and my stomach went cold. I parked at the curb instead of pulling into the garage. I don't know why. Some instinct I didn't have words for yet. I left my suitcase in the trunk and walked across the grass, and the closer I got to the bags, the louder my pulse got in my ears. I crouched down and pulled the drawstring loose on the first one. My suits, the gray one I wore to my brother's wedding, the navy one I'd bought for the Henderson account presentation, crammed in there, wrinkled, no hangers, like someone had cleared out the closet with both arms and just dumped everything. The next bag was shoes, my running sneakers, my dress shoes, the work boots I kept for yard work. The bag after that was underwear and t-shirts all balled up. I kept opening bags, belts, my winter coat in the middle of July. A small wooden box I recognized before I even touched it. My grandfather's watch box, the one with a brass hinge. Inside, his old Bulova was still nestled in the velvet, still ticking. At least, she hadn't broken that. That's when I started feeling something other than confusion. I'm not going to call it anger yet. It was something quieter than anger. Something with edges. I left the bags where they were and I walked up to the porch. My key slid into the lock the way it always did. The knob turned, but the door only opened about an inch before it caught against the deadbolt from the inside. I'd never deadbolted that door from the inside in my life. Sarah didn't either. We had a keypad on the garage and an alarm system. The deadbolt was decorative. I knocked, hard, 3 times. I heard footsteps, a pause, then the bolt sliding back, slow and deliberate. Sarah opened the door, but she didn't open it all the way. She kept her body wedged in a gap, one hand on the frame, the other on the knob. She was wearing the cream cardigan her mother had given her last Christmas, and her hair was pulled back in a way I didn't recognize. Her eyes met mine for a half second and then slid past my shoulder. "You're back early," she said. I stared at her. "It's Thursday. I told you I'd be home tonight." "I thought you were coming back tomorrow." "Sarah," I kept my voice level, "why are my clothes on the lawn?" She didn't answer. Her jaw tightened the way it did when she was bracing for something. Behind her, I could hear movement deeper in the house. Someone walking across the hardwood in the hallway upstairs. Someone who was not my wife and not my daughter. I put my palm flat against the door and pushed. Sarah didn't fight me. She stepped back and let it swing open, and I walked past her into my own house with my heart hammering against my ribs. The smell hit me first. Lavender. A perfume I knew well but never wore in this house. I started up the stairs. The stairs creaked under my weight the way they always did on the fourth and seventh steps. I'd meant to fix that for 2 years. Funny what your brain holds on to when the rest of you is bracing for something terrible. The master bedroom door was open at the end of the hall. Sunlight was pouring through the windows. Our windows. The ones Sarah and I picked out together when we replaced them 3 summers ago. And standing inside with her back to me, hanging a beige blouse on a wooden hanger inside my closet, was my mother-in-law, Diane. She was humming, actually humming, some tune from the radio like she was unpacking in a hotel suite she'd been looking forward to. Her suitcase was open on the bed, my side of the bed. Her toiletry bag was on the nightstand where I kept my reading glasses and the paperback I'd been working through for a month. The glasses in the book were nowhere I could see. She turned when she heard me in the doorway. 62 years old, silver hair cut into the same chin-length bob she'd worn since I'd met her. Lipstick freshly applied. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looks annoyed. "Oh," she said, "you're home." I didn't trust myself to speak yet. I just stood there in the doorway, taking in the room. Her clothes already hung where mine had been 12 hours ago. A framed photograph of Diane and Sarah from some vacation I hadn't been on, sitting on the dresser where my and Sarah's wedding photo used to be. A second nightstand had appeared on my side of the bed, dragged in from somewhere. There was an honest-to-God floral bedspread on top of the duvet Sarah and I had picked out for our anniversary. Sarah came up from the stairs behind me. I felt her stop in the hallway, 3 feet back, not stepping into the room. "Sarah," I said, without turning around, "explain this to me right now, in words." "Don't take that tone with my daughter," Diane said. I turned my head and looked at her, just looked. She held my gaze for about 2 seconds before her eyes flicked away to the closet. "Sarah," I said again. My wife exhaled, and she stepped into the doorway but kept her arms crossed tight across her chest. "Mom needs this space," she said. "She's going through a really hard time and she needs to be close to family right now. We talked about this." "We did not talk about this. We talked about Mom needing more support. In April, for an afternoon, you said she was thinking about getting her own apartment closer to us." I kept my voice low because I knew if I let it climb, I wasn't going to be able to bring it back down. I don't remember the part of that conversation where we agreed she would move into our bedroom and throw my belongings on the lawn. "Don't be dramatic," Diane said. She had gone back to hanging blouses. I turned to face her fully. "I'm sorry. Are you talking to me?" "I'm saying nobody threw anything anywhere. Sarah moved your things to make room. You can sleep in the guest room or somewhere else if you'd prefer." "This is my house." "It's Sarah's house too," she said it without looking at me. I looked back at my wife. Sarah's eyes were wet, but her chin was set in that hard line I'd seen 100 times during arguments. The one that meant she'd already decided she was right and was just waiting for me to catch up. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sarah," I said, "when did she get here?" "Tuesday morning. The same morning I'd left for Pittsburgh. I'd kissed her goodbye at 6 in the morning. Diane must have been pulling into the driveway before my plane was off the runway. You planned this around my trip. I knew you'd react like this." "Like what? Like a person who lives here?" "Like you always react when it comes to my mother." I closed my eyes for a second. I walked out of the bedroom. I didn't slam anything, didn't say anything. I just walked, past Sarah, down the hall, down the stairs. I needed to see how deep this went. The kitchen had been redone. That's the only way I can describe it. My coffee maker, the espresso machine Sarah and Emma had bought me for Father's Day 2 years ago, was gone from the counter. In its place sat a beige drip machine I'd never seen before. The spice rack had been rearranged. My recliner was missing from the family room. In its place was a floral wingback chair I recognized from Diane's old living room. I went down the hallway to Emma's room. The door swung open and I felt something in my chest go very still. Emma's bed was pushed against the far wall, stripped of its sheets. Her stuffed animals were piled in a laundry basket in a corner. A sewing machine sat on a folding table where her desk used to be. Bolts of fabric were stacked against the wall where her bookshelf had been. My 8-year-old daughter's bedroom. Sarah had followed me down. She was standing in the hallway behind me, and when I turned to look at her, she at least had the decency to look ashamed. Mom needed somewhere to do her quitting, she said quietly. Where is Emma supposed to sleep when she comes home Sunday? We were going to figure that out. I nodded slowly. I didn't say anything else. I walked past her back through the kitchen out to the garage. My briefcase was still in the trunk of my car along with the suitcase, but there was a metal filing cabinet in the corner of the garage where I kept household paperwork. I unlocked it, pulled out one specific manila folder, and tucked it under my arm. Then I walked back through the house, out the front door, past my wife, and back to my car without saying another word. The Hampton Inn off the interstate had a vacancy and a tired-looking clerk who didn't ask any questions when I checked in at 7:45 on a Thursday night with a suitcase, a garbage bag full of suits, and a manila folder under my arm. He slid the keycard across the counter and told me checkout was at 11. I told him I'd probably be staying longer than one night. Room 214 smelled like every hotel room I'd ever stayed in. I dropped the bag on the luggage rack, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for a while. The wallpaper had a pattern of little gold diamonds. I counted 12 across before I made myself stop. I called Emma's camp first, not to talk to her. Visiting hours and call windows were strict and it wasn't her time. But I left a message with the front office that I loved her and I'd see her Sunday, and that everything was fine. Saying the word fine out loud almost broke something in me. Then I opened the folder. I'm the one who handles our finances. Sarah and I agreed on that early in our marriage, not because she couldn't, but because numbers calmed me down and stressed her out. Once a month, I'd sit down at the kitchen table with our statements and a cup of coffee and reconcile everything. Sarah would sometimes wander through and kiss the top of my head and call me her accountant. It had been one of those small, quiet rituals that I never thought twice about. I should have. I opened my laptop, logged into the joint checking account, and started scrolling backwards. It took me about 10 minutes to find the first one, a withdrawal in March. $800 in cash from an ATM in a part of town we've never went to. I'd missed it because it was buried under a grocery run and a utility bill on the same day. I scrolled further, another one in April, $1,200, May, $1,500, June, $2,200. I started writing them down on the hotel notepad with a little pen that didn't have enough ink. By the time I was done, I'd counted just over $18,000 in cash withdrawals over that 3-month stretch, always small enough to slip past a casual glance, always on days when there was other activity to camouflage them. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I started thinking backwards through the last 6 months of our life. Sarah taking phone calls in the laundry room with the door closed. Sarah jumping when I walked into the bedroom while she was on her tablet. The 2 weekends in May when she'd driven up to her mom's place by herself and come back tired and quiet. The way she'd snapped at me when I asked if her mom was okay. The way she'd started saying, "Mom thinks," the 4 sentences they used to start with, "I think." I didn't know yet what was at the end of this thread, but I knew Sarah hadn't decided to throw my clothes on the lawn on her own. I pulled up the country clerk's website for the county Diane lived in. Public records are remarkable things. People don't realize how much of their life is sitting in a database that anyone with a laptop can read. There was no divorce filing, none. Diane had been telling Sarah for 3 months that she was divorcing her stepfather, Greg, and there wasn't a single piece of paper anywhere in the public record to support it. What I did find was a small claims filing from June. Greg had filed a civil complaint against Diane for the unauthorized withdrawal of funds from a joint money market account, $26,000. The complaint was still pending. She hadn't divorced. She'd been caught. I leaned back against the cheap headboard and closed my eyes. About 9:30, I picked up my phone and called Rachel. Rachel is Sarah's older sister. She lived in Indianapolis with her husband Mark and their 3 kids. She and I had always gotten along. Birthday cards, the occasional texts on holidays, a shared sense of humor at family gatherings. She was the calm one in that family. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she said, "everything okay?" I told her in as few words as I could manage what I'd come home to. The bags on the lawn, Diane in our bedroom, Emma's room turned into a sewing studio, the withdrawals from the account, the fake divorce. By the time I was finished, Rachel was quiet on the other end of the line. "Oh no," she said finally. "Oh no, no, no." Rachel, she did it to us. She did the same thing to us 8 years ago. I sat up. Rachel told me in a voice that got tighter and tighter as she went about the spring her mother had shown up at her front door in Indianapolis with a sob story and 4 suitcases. About how Diane had moved into their guest room for what was supposed to be 2 weeks and stayed 11 months. About how, by the end, Mark and Rachel were sleeping in separate bedrooms and Mark had been 3 signatures away from filing for divorce. About the money that went missing. About the way Diane had whispered in Rachel's ear every day that Mark didn't appreciate her and that Mark was controlling, that Mark was the problem. "It took my husband putting his foot down to get her out," Rachel said. "And it took us 2 years of counseling to put our marriage back together. I tried to warn Sarah. I tried." "How long has she been working on Sarah?" "Months, probably since Christmas. Listen to me." Rachel's voice dropped. "She'll turn my sister against you completely if you don't act now. Whatever you're thinking of doing, do it tomorrow." I told her thank you. I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I made a list instead. I called the attorney's office at 5 minutes past 9 the next morning. I'd found her name on a list I'd compiled during my sleepless night. Margaret Willen, 23 years of family law experience, downtown office, 4-star reviews from clients who described her as calm and thorough, and in one memorable phrase, "the woman you want in your corner when your life is on fire." I called expecting to schedule something for next week. The receptionist asked if I could be there by 10:30. Someone had canceled. Margaret Wellen was about my mom's age, with reading glasses on a chain and an office that smelled like old books and good coffee. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. She wrote things down in a leather-bound notebook in handwriting I couldn't read upside down. When I finished, she set down her pen. "I'm not going to tell you to file for divorce," she said. "That's your decision and it's a long one. What I am going to tell you is that you have a 48-hour window where the choices you make are going to determine what your options look like 6 months from now. So let's talk about the next 48 hours. She walked me through it. Document everything: photographs of the bags on the lawn, photographs of Emma's room, copies of the bank withdrawals. Don't drain the joint account, but separate out a defensible share into a new account in my name only. File a police report about the garbage bags, not to press charges, but to establish a paper trail showing that I was dispossessed of my property without consent. Don't move back into the house until the situation was resolved one way or the other, because doing so could be construed as accepting it." And she said, looking at me over the top of her reading glasses, "Do not say anything to your wife that you wouldn't want read back to you in a courtroom." I left her office at 12:30 with a printed checklist and a calmer pulse than I had in 18 hours. The bank was next. I sat down with a personal banker named Devin, a young guy in a gray suit who didn't blink when I told him I needed to open an individual account and move exactly half of the joint checking and savings into it. He pulled up the accounts, he confirmed the balances, he printed forms. By 2 in the afternoon, my half of the marital liquid assets, minus the 18,000 Diane had already siphoned, which I made a separate note about, was sitting in an account with my name on it, and only my name on it. I left the joint accounts open. I didn't touch the rest. The police report took 20 minutes at a substation near the hotel. The officer was a woman in her 40s who took my statement and clicked through her computer and printed me a copy of the incident number. She asked if I wanted to file for trespass or theft. I said no. I just wanted it on the record. Then I called Emma's camp again and asked to speak with the director. I told her in measured language that there was a domestic situation at home and that I wanted her to know I would be the one picking Emma up on Sunday. and I asked her to call me directly if my wife or anyone else attempted to retrieve my daughter early. She was kind about it. She asked if Emma was safe. I told her Emma was safe and didn't know yet, and I wanted to keep it that way until I could tell her myself. The last call I made that afternoon was to a sheriff's deputy I'd been put in touch with through Margaret's office, a civil standby. He'd meet me at the house Saturday morning at 9 and stand on the porch while I retrieved what was left of my belongings. No drama, no confrontation, just a uniformed witness. That night, back in room 214, I ate a turkey sandwich from the gas station next to the hotel and watched the clock crawl towards Saturday. I didn't text Sarah. I didn't call Sarah. She'd sent me 4 messages over the course of the day, escalating in tone. First asking where I was, then telling me I was being childish, then telling me I was scaring her, then a long paragraph about how I'd abandoned her in a difficult time, and her mom was right about me. I read each one once and didn't reply. Margaret had been clear about that. Saturday morning came, gray and humid. The deputy met me in the driveway at 9 sharp. He was younger than I expected, polite, professional. He stood on the porch with his thumbs hooked in his duty belt while I rang my own doorbell. Sarah opened the door. When she saw the uniform behind me, her face went the color of paper. "What is this?" she said. "This is me getting my things," I said. "Officer Reyes is here as a witness. He won't come inside unless he needs to. I'm going to walk through the house and collect my belongings, and then I'm going to leave." Diane appeared at the top of the stairs. "What is going on down there?" "Stay where you are, ma'am," the deputy said in a voice that was perfectly polite and perfectly final. I walked through my own house with a duffel bag and gathered up the things that were still mine. My toolbox from the garage, the rest of my paperwork from the filing cabinet, a small photo album of Emma I'd kept in my nightstand drawer, which had been moved into the guest room, my grandfather's watch box, which I'd already taken Thursday but went back to confirm. When I came back downstairs, Sarah was crying in the kitchen. I set the duffel bag down by the front door and reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "Read this when I'm gone," I said. I left. The envelope had everything in it. The court filing from Greg in Pennsylvania, the ATM withdrawal records highlighted in yellow, a printout of the conversation I'd had with Rachel summarized in 3 paragraphs of plain language, a copy of the police report in a single typed letter from me, 2 pages long, that I'd spent 4 hours writing in the hotel room the night before. The letter didn't accuse Sarah of anything. It laid out what I knew. It said I loved her. It said her mother had a pattern. It said I would not be coming home until Diane was gone, and that Diane needed to be gone within 30 days, and that if she wasn't, I would be filing for divorce and seeking primary custody of Emma. It said the choice was hers. Sarah called me Saturday night. I didn't answer. She called again Sunday morning. I didn't answer that one either. I was in the car driving up to camp to pick up my daughter, and Emma was the only person I wanted to think about for the next few hours. Emma got in the car sunburned and bug-bitten and full of stories about a girl named Priya who had taught her how to start a fire with a magnifying glass. I drove her to the hotel. I'd already explained on the phone the night before that we were going to have a fun father-daughter weekend at a hotel with a pool because Mom had some grown-up things to figure out. Emma had accepted this the way 8-year-olds accept most adult logic, with a shrug and a question about whether the pool had a deep end. Sarah called 11 times that Sunday. I texted her once late in the afternoon from the hotel pool deck while Emma did headstands in the shallow end. 3 sentences. "Emma is with me. She's safe. Read the envelope." She read it. The first crack came Tuesday afternoon. Sarah called me from her car, parked outside a Target, and her voice was different. Smaller. She'd looked through the bank statements herself. She'd called Greg in Pennsylvania, the man she'd been told was a monster, and Greg had cried on the phone with her for 40 minutes. She'd asked her mom to explain the withdrawals, and her mother said it was for the divorce lawyer. Sarah had asked which lawyer. Diane had named a firm. Sarah had called the firm had never heard of her. "She's been lying to me about all of it," Sarah said. She wasn't quite crying. She was past crying, into something flatter. "She told me you were having an affair in your trip. She had me convinced. She said the woman from your office was..." Sarah stopped. "It doesn't matter what she said." I closed my eyes. "No, it doesn't." "I need her out of my house," Sarah said. "Our house. I'm sorry. Please." It wasn't that simple. Diane had dug in. When Sarah told her that night that she had to leave, Diane went from injured to furious in the span of a single sentence. She told Sarah she'd never been a good daughter. She told Sarah that I had brainwashed her. She told Sarah she'd regret this for the rest of her life. She refused to pack. She locked herself in our bedroom. I had been preparing for this, so had Margaret. Diane had no lease, no claim, no tenancy established under Ohio law in the brief window she'd been there. The sheriff came on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after the day I'd come home from Pittsburgh, and Diane was escorted off the property with her suitcases in 2 trips. Sarah watched from the porch. She didn't cry. She didn't wave. She just watched her mother get into that white Buick and pull out of our driveway for the last time. I didn't move back in that day. I didn't move back in for 2 weeks more. Sarah and I started seeing a counselor named Dr. Patel, a quiet man in his 60s who asked the kind of questions that made you actually think before you answered. Sarah started seeing him on her own too, twice a week, working on what we called her relationship with maternal authority. When I finally did move my things back into the house, I slept in the guest room for the first month, not because Sarah asked me to, because I needed her to understand that trust didn't come back the same way it left. She understood. To her credit, she understood completely. Emma came home from camp to a quieter house than the one she'd left. She asked, the second night, why Daddy was sleeping in the other room. I told her Mommy and Daddy were working some grown-up things out and that we both loved her very much, and that nothing about her life was changing. She accepted this with the same shrug she'd given the hotel. 6 months later, things looked different. Sarah and I were sleeping in the same bed again. The kitchen had my coffee maker back. Emma's room had Emma's things back. I had stopped flinching every time my wife's phone buzzed. Diane, last I'd heard, was living in Rachel's guest room in Indianapolis. Rachel had warned her, before she let her in, that there were rules and cameras and an ironclad timeline. Within 6 weeks, things had started disappearing from Rachel's medicine cabinet. Rachel called me one Saturday morning to tell me Diane was being asked to leave again, and we laughed in the dry, exhausted way that only family can laugh about family. I think about that drive home from Pittsburgh sometimes. The garbage bags on the lawn, the locked deadbolt, the smell of lavender perfume in a house where no one wore lavender perfume. I didn't win by yelling. I didn't win by being cruel. I won by staying calm, knowing the law, and trusting the right people. That's the only revenge that ever actually works. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.